It is 8 p.m. and we are ready to start. I'm Marlene Drescher from the Tikkun Alum Committee, and we are so grateful that Gidon Bromberg from Ecopeace Middle East is speaking to us from Israel. Ecopeace Middle East is at the forefront of the environmental peacemaking movement. Jordanian, Palestinian, and Israeli environmentalists, the primary objective is to promote cooperative efforts to protect and advance sustainable regional development with lasting peace for the region. Ecopeace has been nominated a second time for the Nobel Prize as Gidon talks about their impact in perhaps the most explosive region on the planet. Please consider providing monetary support. Intermittently, you will see that the donate button appears in the chat. Please consider donating to Ecopeace so they can continue doing their groundbreaking work. We are asking you to press mute on your screens now. You will have time to enter your questions on the chat, but now and through the rest of the presentation, please stay muted. Gidon will speak for about 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session for 20 to 30 minutes. Rabbi Ruchi Sophia Motzkin-Rubenstein is here to introduce you to Gidon. Ruchi?
I'm delighted to be here this evening and delighted that we could make this work, and delighted especially that Gidon Bromberg is here with us virtually. It has been 6 years since we got to learn from Gidon, who visited us in person when he was here for the ELAW conference back in October of 2019. Gidon co-founded Ecopeace Middle East in 1994 and has served as its Israeli director for 3 decades, but not its only director. Mr. Bromberg is an attorney by profession, an alumni of Monash University in Australia, Washington College of Law at American University, and Yale University's World Fellows Program. He has been immersed in the environmental peacebuilding world for over 30 years. He's written extensively on the relationship between natural resource diplomacy and Middle East peace. He has presented on these issues before the UN Security Council, US Congress, European Parliament, UN Climate Summit, and in other local and international forums, including the ELAW conference that brought him to Eugene. We are very fortunate that he is a morning person because it is 5 a.m. in Israel right now, whence he is joining us. And I will say personally that as someone who has in a lay capacity been attending in various ways both to the environmental crisis and to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for some decades, Gidon Bromberg is the most creative and visionary thinker I have ever heard on either of those two topics, and certainly on the intersection of both, categorically. So I am so delighted that he is willing to speak with our community again, and I am happy to turn it over to him now.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Ruchi. Those very kind words. I am really delighted to be speaking again to the community there in Eugene. It's a it's a hard time. It's still a very hard time in Israel, in Palestine, in the broader region. We still have a lot of uncertainty. There's still tremendous risks that this region faces when we talk about both the environment and when we talk about peace. But I remain optimistic. I remain optimistic that we can come through this. That certainly, for the first time in 2 years, there's reason for some optimism, and I hope I'll get questions on these issues as well. But I'm also optimistic that from my 3 decades of work, that people can make a difference. That the type of efforts that we're doing at Ecopeace and other organizations, there's so many other brilliant organizations out there as well for both peace building and for environment, that together we do make a difference, and we change the path, and we bring cleaner water and cleaner energy and build trust between our peoples. And that's certainly been the focus of the work of Ecopeace, and the outcomes of so much of our work. The tragic events of October 7th and the 2 years of war that followed were very difficult periods for Ecopeace as well. I mean, we lost loved ones, we lost residents around the Gaza envelope in Israel who were friends. One of the mayors that was murdered was a very close colleague of Ecopeace that only a month earlier had organized a conference with us about how to continue to improve, because we were working with him and his community for several years to improve Gaza. And we were of 0 in Gaza 5 years earlier, and by the time we had a conference, 65% of the sewage of Gaza was being treated, much because of cooperative efforts. And we held a conference in his community, a kilometer from the fence, about how do we move beyond that. And we even had some Palestinian residents, not only from Ramallah, my co-director, my Palestinian co-director in our office, but also from Gaza. And yet the horrors of October 7th, and then the ensuing war could have really torn us apart. We had to actually hire a therapist in each office, because for the first month we felt that we weren't coping. We were seeing such completely different news. We had such a completely different narrative, even though we'd been working together for so long. The events were just so traumatic that we felt that we needed external assistance, and we followed that up with hiring a specialist in meditation from Sri Lanka, who had gone through the horrific civil war of Sri Lanka and developed a whole methodology through Zoom of conflict resolution through meditation, breathing together. We started just with the leadership team, our directors. We have a director in each office. We have a 9-person leadership team, Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian. And we started meeting every day and doing meditation together every day, and try to understand suffering and accept your suffering and also your neighbor's suffering, and not trying to compare. Just accept that we're all suffering. And by accepting each other's suffering, it really helped us to break down emotions that were really heightened. We started with the leadership team, then we went on to departments, and then the whole organization. We continued our work, but throughout. But this process of allowing ourselves to try to heal was critical. By May 24, we already had our first regional gathering, where again in the middle of the war, we had 60 staff. Ecopeace is 20 Palestinian, 20 Jordanian, 20 Israeli staff. It looks like I lost you.
Yes, Gidon, I think we lost you after you mentioned being able to pull together a conference with 20 Palestinian, 20 Jordanian, 20 Israeli staff, and I
Yes.
don't think we heard anything after those numbers.
So we came together, and that was a real breakthrough. Coming together, we understand that we were the first organization that was able to bring their staff together after October 7th and the ensuing war, where we'd lost family and friends in the Israeli office, in the Palestinian office, in the Jordanian office, in our other offices. Some staff lost 100 members of their extended family. Yet we're able to come together, and that meditation, that meditation was really critical to those efforts. And by the summer already of 24, as I go through the different programming that Ecopeace has undertaken, we're able to bring Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian teachers together, and we're able to bring young professionals together in the middle of the war, and we're able to have our programming oversubscribed because our staff was so committed. We're able to overcome the hate and the depression, and see the work as sort of part of our own inner salvation, for this broader effort, and by having sort of inner certainty, you can always be more powerful in bringing others on board. And really, since May of 24, there's been no turning back, and we're a powerful force that I'm really excited about telling you more as to what we do. But let me share with you a PowerPoint, and we'll go a little bit through some history of Ecopeace, because Ecopeace started back in '94. It was, in fact, an idea from my thesis at American University, doing a master's in international environmental law. Back in '93, '94, when I was in DC, we were all certain that peace had broken out with the signing of the Israel-Jordan Peace Treaty and the Oslo Accords. And the concern was, well, was the environment going to pay the price of peace from overdevelopment? 50,000 new hotels were being proposed around the Dead Sea, as an example, and major highways that really didn't take the environment into account. And the conclusion of my thesis was that, well, perhaps if an environmental NGO that was Israeli and Palestinian and Jordanian and Egyptian was created, maybe we could make sure that the peace that we were so certain was happening would also be, would be not only peace between people, but also peace with nature, a sustainable peace. And after several months of research and work, I reached out to environmental leaders, and this photo on the top is a meeting, the first meeting of what became the Ecopeace board. Palestinians, Jordan. This is Professor Ngazi from Gaza, Adnan Bourieri from Jordan, myself down here, 30 years younger. I think what really highlights is that it was all men, and how inappropriate could that be? But that was the reality at the time. These were the environmental leaders who were willing to take a risk from Egypt, from Jordan, from Israel, and from Palestine to come and work together. And on the second day of this meeting, we created Ecopeace Middle East, the first ever regional environmental organization that included Israelis together with Jordanians, Palestinians, and Egyptians. how different is the organization today? So this is a photo of myself again, but my Palestinian co-director, Nada Majdalani, my Jordanian co-director, Yana Abu Talib from Jordan and from Palestine, at the UN Security Council. We were just finishing a presentation together before the Security Council, invited by the German president at the time. And I recall the event. We've twice spoken before the Security Council, and I recall this first event very clearly because we saw that at the end of our presentation, both the Israeli and the Palestinian ambassadors to the UN, following our remarks, thank Ecopeace for its work, which is remarkable because the Israeli and Palestinian ambassadors will never agree on anything. And you literally saw the faces of the rest of the ambassadors around the Security Council being shocked that there seemed to be some sort of agreement here. And of course, that agreement was on, the need to protect our shared water resources and our shared environment. I love the photos here because it also speaks to the type of work that Ecopeace has undertaken over these years. This other photo I really love because it speaks to our work on the ground. These are young water trustees. We're at the River Jordan. Now, I think many of you that haven't been to the River Jordan would be shocked to see that this is the River Jordan where Jewish miracles have taken place, where according to Christianity, Jesus is baptized, where according to Islam, several companions to the Prophet Muhammad are buried. And yet this river is only 4 meters wide. We're on the west bank side of the river, and on the other side is Jordan. We have youth water trustees on the other side, Jordanian, and we have Israeli and Palestinian on this side. And they're all coming with the same message, that water issues can't wait, that they want to see the Jordan River rehabilitated. Now, the Jordan River at this site used to be 100 meters wide. It's still only 4. And the water quality is something that you wouldn't want to be baptized in, or to to enter, to swim in, because it's quite heavily polluted, still with sewage, mostly Jordanian, a little bit Palestinian, and lots of agricultural runoff that's also Israeli, but mostly with its fresh water diverted. And here Israel takes about half the water that would otherwise flow down that river. The more optimistic photo is this one of mayors. And these are Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian mayors, closer to the Sea of Galilee, where the water is perfectly clean. And they're literally sort of standing, they're about to jump into the River Jordan, because after years of work, particularly of the youth, they've come to understand that they're all losers, that the demise of the river has been at the expense of their communities. And it's the education programs that I'll speak about that have helped them understand that no one is going to solve the issues of the Jordan River if they don't take leadership towards solving those issues. And that's what they're doing here. Sadly, I don't think that this photo could take place today. Things are still way too raw. I can say to you that the day after, this photo, and we did several events like these, the mayors would face condemnation from members of their own community that would come and say that no, they're acting as traitors. They're working for the other side. They're not representing the interests of their sort of tribe, of their country. But the power of our work was that it remains that we empower, whether it's young people or it's mayors, to tell a different story. That cooperation on the environment, on water, is not a privilege. No one's doing a favor. If we don't work on these issues, then the very source of our life, which is water, and the environment and water issues are something that is very ingrained here. First and foremost, because it doesn't rain. It's only rained once since autumn has arrived. We've had one good day of rain. We're about to enter November, and the last good rains that took place happened in early April, and that's natural. So it's a natural cycle that it just doesn't rain for 6-7 months of the year. But what's not natural is that in the rainy period in the winter, we had less than 50% of the average rainfall. We had the driest winter last year in historical record ever. And then sort of that takes me to why our work makes so much sense, and how we're all connected to the climate crisis and why we need to work together. So, this is the map of the Middle East, North Africa region. It's the driest region in the world. We're not alone. It's not just Israel. It's really the whole Middle East, North Africa region. We're already naturally the driest region. Our region is also the most conflict prone. It's not just Israel, Palestine. We have so many conflicts throughout our region. Now, most of these conflicts are not started by water issues, but in very many of them, the lack of water is one of the reasons, is an issue that further exacerbates the conflict that exists there. And then we come to the climate crisis, where we're also a hotspot. We're one of the parts of the world where the temperature change, or the impacts of the climate crisis, are greater than the average for the world. So I can tell you, here in Tel Aviv, the Mediterranean, the beaches, the Mediterranean Sea off Tel Aviv is already 2 degrees higher on average than its average 3 decades ago. We're now seeing 31-degree water temperature. It's a hot bath. We're seeing a 2-degree increase in temperatures already taking place. The whole climate fear is a 1.5-degree increase in temperature before things get out of control. Well, that's a global average. We're already over 2, and we're expecting an additional 4-degree increase in temperature by the end of the century if we don't stop the climate crisis. So we're going to see a lot more conflict. This is very much about our livelihood. This is very much about our future. And by helping our public understand that, then we empower them to defend themselves, to come and say to the spoilers, because there are spoilers on all sides, that no, I'm not the traitor. You have got it wrong. I'm acting in your interest. I'm looking after your families and your future, because We claim to love the land, but there will be no land to love if we don't deal with these issues. And guess what? We can't deal with the environment alone. The only way to deal with the environment is to work with your neighbors. I love this map because it completely confuses people. Where is Israel? Where's the West Bank? Where's Gaza? Where's Jordan? This is a map of watersheds. The green line is somewhere in the middle of this green. The water basins, this is the water basin of the Yarkon River. Most of the basin is in the West Bank. If we want to keep the Yarkon River that flows into the middle of Tel Aviv clean, if we don't work with our neighbors, then we can never keep it clean. We are dependent on each other. And when you look at all of these basins, the border of Israel and Jordan goes through the middle of the Arava watershed. So the whole region is connected, and the political borders, as important as they can be, get in the way and require us to work beyond our borders if we're to protect our water. So where do things stand? What are our water resources? So when we look at this map, we see, of course, the famous Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is fed from the upper Jordan River, which is fed from three streams: the Dan starting in Israel, the Hatzbani starting in Lebanon, the Banyas, which is in the Golan Heights, formerly in Syrian territory, and the Hula Valley, somewhere here in the middle, is where those three streams come together and feed the Sea of Galilee. And then the Sea of Galilee would naturally, the Jordan River would naturally flow out of the Sea of Galilee and replenish the Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth. Many people associate the Sea of Galilee with Israel's drinking water. Another source of important water is the aquifer. The light blue is the recharge area of groundwater, of what's called the mountain aquifer. And the darker blue is the storage area of the aquifer. The West Bank and Israel underlie that aquifer. Most of the recharge of the aquifer is in the West Bank. Most of the storage of the aquifer is in Israel. And that's why most of the springs of that aquifer, like Rosh Ha'ain, the head of the spring, is in Israel. And then we have a third natural body of water, which is the coastal aquifer between Israel and Gaza. And this is on the coastal plain, literally where the water falls and percolates into the ground. And because it's flat, it doesn't really flow here. While here in the mountain aquifer, because it's mountainous, the water flows either west towards the Mediterranean or east towards the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. These are the three bodies of water that natural bodies of water that have given the source of all life for Israelis. But it's important to highlight equally for Palestinians and equally for Jordanians. Today, these waters are no longer the main source of water, certainly for Israelis. So the blue dots here, 5 of them, are modern desalination plants, where technology has advanced to take water from the sea, remove the salts and other minerals, and turn it into drinking water. Within 20 minutes, basically, you turn seawater into drinking water. And today, that's 90% of Israel's drinking water coming from desalination, with additional desalination plants currently being completed, and smaller plants also in Gaza, with need of bigger plants. These are various political agreements that were signed over water between Rabin and King Hussein of Jordan, the late King Hussein and the late Rabin. The water agreement in the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan is signed on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, where the two sides have agreed on how to allocate their water. But the other photos involving the Palestinian Minister of Water, both of these photos show a failure to come to a final agreement, because unfortunately, we've never come to a final agreement with the Palestinian Authority between Israel and Palestine. And water, in many ways, has continued to be held hostage to the failure to agree on other final status issues, Jerusalem, borders, settlements. While water today could be completed, could be agreed upon, because we are no longer dependent just on natural water. Israel is the world leader, both in desalination and in treating sewage and reusing it for agriculture, so that the water pie has tremendously increased, yet no agreement reached on water, and I'll come back to that. Despite a water agreement between Israel and Jordan, the situation in Jordan is terrible. And because of the drought of last year, Jordan, this is Amman, the capital, on the top of every house, every building, there's water tanks. There is no 24/7 water supply from the municipality. Until several years ago, water supply was once every 8 days. The municipality supplies water once every 8 days, and you fill your tanks, and you need to do until the municipality supplies again, unless you have money and you can bring a water tanker and fill in your tanks, but that costs you perhaps 10 times higher than municipal water. Currently, water supply is once every 12 days because of the lack of water. And the solution is going to be cooperation, which I'll go into. In the West Bank, the situation is very similar. In Jordan, it's not political. It's even drier than Israel. With the West Bank and Gaza, it's also climate, dryness, but it's also the failure to agree on a fair allocation of water, because in Israel, we do still take the lion's share of the natural water. And both the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority take the position that either we can agree on all final status issues of Jerusalem and refugees and borders and water, or we don't agree on anything. And part of Ecopeace advocacy is say, enough, no, that's wrong. And perhaps in this coming year, we are hopeful that we're going to see some breakthrough. The lower photo is Gaza. Of course, the situation today is much, much worse than this photo. And I'll go into that. While Israel is a world leader on the treatment of sewage, that's not the case in the rest of the region. This is sewage from the West Bank, untreated. Again, complicated because of the conflict, complicated because of lack of financial resources, but raw sewage, polluting shared, scarce, and natural waters that we must do so much better on. And it's in this framework that I want to speak about the good news, about the bright stuff. And so for the last 7 years, we've been bringing together, these are Israeli climate diplomats. They're young professionals. They're either in late university or early career from various fields, media, politics, private sector, government, who have come together to learn about the climate crisis, to learn about diplomacy, and advance some skill sets on diplomacy, and then try to do something about it, to try to build further understanding for themselves by learning these issues and by meeting with their counterparts, Palestinian and Jordanian. And this is in the middle of the war. This is in Cyprus, where we're able to bring 80 what we call climate diplomats, a third Palestinian, a third Jordanian, a third Israeli, in the middle of the war, willing to come together. Again, not because they're best friends, because they understand that their future is dependent on these issues. So these are our climate diplomats program. Similarly for teachers, in Israel, we maintain a program that has the support of the Ministry of Education, where we've written the curriculum on regional climate issues, and we actually train Israeli teachers in geography, in environmental sciences, in English and Arabic, to use the environment as something to also advance language education. To be honest, I think if the minister knew what we were doing, we would probably be stopped. But the bureaucracy is so protective of our work that it's not shared. And thankfully in Israel still, the minister doesn't need to know everything. This is not his responsibility as to the precise details as to what students are taught. Unfortunately, in the Palestinian Ministry of Education and Jordanian Ministry of Education, we don't have the same level of support, and our staff have to work through contacts that they've developed over 30 years with schools, with school principals. But we still, again, in the middle of the war, managed to bring 60 teachers, 20 Palestinian, 20 Israeli, 20 Jordanian, twice together. Generally, we'd do this in Cyprus, but because of the war, we're doing it. Generally, we'd do this in Jordan. Because of the war, we're bringing them to Cyprus together to understand, to share their experiences with teaching these curriculums, to help them build trust amongst themselves that they can share with their students that there is a partner on the other side. At a more national level, because we can't do this cross-border anymore, the teachers that are involved in our training, we then offer their whole class a guided tour along a stream to see the pollution, to see the demise, to promote an understanding that this is not about being nice to each other. This is our shared future. And we literally have thousands of young people every year on all sides joining our what we call neighbors path tours. In early years, we'd actually have some cross-border tours as well, but in these last years, that's not possible. But you get the message because you see the connectedness and the interdependence. Lastly, on our education, we also have a fantastic program in Aqaba and Eilat to protect the biodiversity, this unique coral tropical reef, the most northern coral reef in the world, at the very top of that Gulf. And again, throughout the war, young Israeli and Jordanian students, teachers, climate diplomats coming together to try and protect the Red Sea. Jordan River work remains hard, but we have real success, and of course we celebrate that success because it's so hard to get. This is in Israel. Instead of a narrow, dirty canal, we see a rehabilitated, weir. So the situation here used to be that the Jordan River would come to a complete stop from its outlet from the Sea of Galilee, and no fresh water would leave the Sea of Galilee in Israel and flow down to the Dead Sea. That's no longer the case, and it's only because of advocacy. And 99% is due to the work of Ecopeace. So we don't see still the quantity of water that we'd like to see, but now it is clean water, and it's uninterrupted. So natural water is flowing, and literally months before the horror of October 7th, we managed to get an agreement signed. This is the former Minister of the Environment of Israel, the former Minister of Water of Jordan, signing a memorandum of understanding, of cooperation to rehabilitate the River Jordan together. First time ever, signed in 2022. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have also, Palestine join this, mostly because of the way that the coalition government of Israel existed at the time. But still an incredible commitment for cooperation from students to mayors to ministers. And that's the type of leadership that we build. And perhaps I'll also speak about the Dead Sea for questions. Another political agreement signed as a letter of intent in 21, and then another memorandum of understanding in 22 between the governments of the UAE in the middle. You see John Kerry here, the Jordanian Minister of Water again, and the Israeli Minister of Energy, where the work of Ecopeace, a study undertaken by Ecopeace back in 2017 on how we can utilize our comparative advantages of Jordan's vast desert areas to produce renewable energy, selling it to Israel, and using that renewable energy to desalinate water and selling it back to Jordan, with much of the finance coming from the Emirates. So we flew into Dubai and Abu Dhabi before the Abraham Accords, and we met with companies from the UAE who were already building solar facilities in Jordan, and said to them, you have an opportunity to sell more by just pulling a cable and also selling to Israel. And after the Abraham Accords happened, within 6 months, this deal is signed, $1 billion deal. Sadly, it came to a halt on October 7th, or after October 7th. In November of the same year, the actual purchase, water purchase agreement and energy purchase agreement was supposed to be signed. But we know that our countries want to come back to this. But again, in the middle of the war, other agreements continued, agreements that were signed and were operating. And again, Ecopeace played a really important role in renewing water sale agreements between Israel and Jordan. Over these last 2 years, we're very active on water, sanitation, and health issues in Gaza. We're currently involved in repair of 7 trucks, water trucks in Gaza, that help distribute water to displaced populations. We're repairing rehabilitating a water well. We're working very closely with the authorities on both sides. The water pipes, the main 3 sources of water from to Gaza are water pipes coming from Israel. At the beginning of the war, the Israeli Minister of Defense called to close those water pipes. We called to keep them open, and at various times during the war, they were either open, damaged because of the war, repaired. Today, all 3 pipes are flowing, and this is the most major source of water for the population in Gaza. And then finally, before we open up to questions, I also want to speak about the larger picture of, beyond the humanitarian efforts that we're doing, how we're going beyond the water energy exchange. And we're currently focused from an advocacy perspective on this corridor called the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. And what at Ecopeace we're calling the need to focus on creating sustainability and an engine for peace and sustainability by using the economic corridor to help advance the two-state solution, to help advance sustainability by focusing on Israel, Palestine, and Jordan together. And we've led some remarkable studies in the middle of a war that show how our region can not only supply renewable energy for ourselves, but to do that for Europe as well, for 30% of the electricity from Greece to Germany through renewable energy, wind and solar, and that can go through not only Israel and not only Egypt, but also Gaza. That the famous railway that's being described in this project, connecting the Gulf with the Eastern Mediterranean, can go through not just Haifa, but also the West Bank and Gaza, and also Syria and Lebanon, as part of a recovery for those economies, but also a transformative impact, not only on the environment through renewables and rail, but also on security, by making sure that the national security of the Gulf becomes dependent on stability between Israelis and Palestinians and Syrians and Lebanese. And much of our experience here is coming from the experience of Europe, of coal and steel, the coal and steel agreement after the Second World War, where the United States forced France to cooperate with Germany. Germany had the coal, France had the steel. After the Second World War, the last thing that France wanted to do was to cooperate with Germany. And US leadership forced that cooperation and that agreement that helped create healthy interdependencies based on natural resources. So we're focused on the healthy interdependencies that could be created through renewable energy, through desalination, through electrified railway and turning ports to not just national ports, but interconnected ports. And we're getting lots of buy-in. We're actually speaking with the Trump administration. We're speaking with our own governments, with the European governments, with the Gulf governments. And although it's still early days, many of our ideas are being extremely welcomed, because we're not just talking about the environment. We're not just talking about sustainability. We're talking about political solutions. We're talking about security, mutual security for us all. So I'm going to stop here and allow perhaps time for some questions. I think we have, at least another 20 minutes.
Thank you so much, Gidon. That was amazing. You covered so much. If people could, I think it would be best if people put their questions into chat. This way you can just kind of succinctly, ask whatever you'd like to ask, and then Gidon can respond. I'll just start with, I'll just speak. I'll just start with one question. When you talked about people being called traitors and then they withdrew from some of the activities, and then you talked about how the youth are getting youth involved. How were um, you helping students, young people, these young professionals overcome this fear of being called a traitor and continuing or getting into involved in this such important work for everybody's security, as you said.
So I mean, I think the clue here is to show this self-interest that working on these climate, water, environment issues is necessary to your own livelihood. It's about providing data. So Ecopeace does a lot of research, but the way that we do our research is we'll generally hire a Israeli expert together with a Palestinian and a Jordanian expert to do that sort of joint fact finding, because there's a dispute as to the facts, like in any conflict. When we started our work on understanding the demise of the Jordan River, most Israeli experts would say, yeah, we're partly to blame, but most of the water is taken by the Syrians and the Jordanians. And when you asked Palestinian and Jordanian water experts, most would say it's all Israel. And only when we actually brought them together, so firstly we had to find experts, scientists that were willing, and not all are willing, to work together and really go through the data. Were they able to agree that actually we're all responsible, that half the water is taken by Israel, the other half is taken by Syria and Jordan. The Palestinians take next to nothing, but they do contribute sewage. And like also Jordan, most of the sewage is Jordanian and Palestinian. And thankfully today, very little of it is Israeli. So that we all have responsibility. And I think that's the point. By identifying, rather than playing the blame game, which is so easy and so common in our region, to try to highlight my side's responsibility, and therefore what my side can do. And of course, the simple fact that when these water resources don't respect borders, as none of them do, the only way to clean up and to protect your self-interest is to work with the other side, because the water is shared. The river is the border, or crosses the border if it's a stream, one of our 12 cross-border streams. So by providing the evidence and then having Jordanians present that evidence to Jordanians, Palestinians to Palestinian, Israeli to Israeli, so that there's a level of credibility. In that way, we empower people to respond. No, I'm not a traitor. You have it wrong. And although in every case, some people can't stand that pressure. We've had a mayor lose his job, where a government sacked the mayor because they attended our joint activities. We've had teachers sacked from their respective ministries of education, where we had to battle at a national level to get them reinstated because the minister of the particular country discovered that they had attended a regional. So these are really brave people that have that sometimes pay a real price in their careers, in their income. But our work is designed, and I think one of the lessons of the Oslo Accords, and perhaps why it wasn't successful, is that we underestimated the power of the spoilers, of the far right on the Israeli side, of the Islamic extremism on the Palestinian and Jordanian side, and we allowed them to dictate so much of the public debate. And And I think the lesson, or the opportunity that we bring in our environmental education is that we empower people to answer, why we need to solve these issues. What price are we paying by not solving them? And that the only way to solve them is to work together. And that means building trust, not seeing, everyone from the other side as your enemy. Well, that's a failed strategy.
Thank you so much. Rabbi, you had your hand up?
I did, but I just followed the instructions and put them in the chat, put the question in the chat.
Thanks.
I know there is a conception, which I think especially more secular, less religious people like to indulge in, perhaps to an untrue extent, that that it's the religious fanatics that are the obstacle to peace. And I wonder if you can speak to how Ecopeace navigates the religious secular polarization and speaks to the self-interest and the visions of the Orthodox and religious community, as well as the secular pragmatists.
So we have a real opportunity because the Jordan River is holy to us all. It's holy to Judaism. It's certainly holy to Christianity, and it's a river where several of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad are buried on its eastern bank. So we all, the three Abrahamic traditions, have great value to the river, and therefore we use that. And we've had imams and rabbis and priests come down to the Jordan River together. We've taken them on tours to understand the demise of that river. We've asked them to read from their respective holy books in reference to the river, and to sign a covenant together, calling for the cooperation to rehabilitate the River Jordan. So because water, is so instrumental to our Bedouin sort of faiths, we're all desert people. With the children of Abraham, coming out of the desert, where water is so much of intertwined with our faith, on all in all three faiths, in all three Abrahamic faiths. So focusing on water speaks to religious people, and I think we've succeeded in making sure that religion is not the problem. Religion and our respective faiths, we can use the text from our respective faiths to build cooperation over. Now that voice is not loud enough, though, and I think the opportunity for yourselves in Eugene and your synagogue is to reach out also to mosques and churches in your communities, and we've been involved in some of that work in the UK, in New York, where we've been invited by interfaith groups to speak about the Jordan River, to give some real concrete examples of why our respective Abrahamic faiths should be coming together. And I think, given the polarization, and not only, of course, of the conflict in our part of the world, but everywhere, the Jordan River and water, as being so basic to our faith traditions, is an opportunity to help to break those barriers, and the work that we're doing in the region helps to empower faith-based communities elsewhere. And we often say, well, if we can work together as Christians, Jews, and Muslims in the Holy Land, then what excuse do you have, in faraway corners of the world, not to embrace these issues and not to help us by working together in your own community? So, on our website, we have lots of materials in our publications on the Jordan River, from a faith-based perspective, the importance of the Jordan in Judaism, in Islam, in Christianity, and calls to to bring that to sermons in communities in order to encourage community members around the world also to come together.
Thank you. That's a great call to action for us. The next question was from Barbara. How do you keep yourself and your colleagues from Jordan and Palestine safe?
So that's a number one concern for us. It means that we can no longer, the government of Jordan has given Ecopeace a large parcel of land where we've planted over 40,000 trees. It's right next to the border with Israel in the north, just south of the Sea of Galilee, north of Jordan. And we've built there over the last 20 odd years a field school, an educational school where we have overnight accommodation. We have trails, and there's even when there's better rain, there's a waterfall, and we learn together about nature on that site. And traditionally, much of our regional gatherings, we would be bringing Israelis and Jordanians and Palestinians together there. We haven't been able to do that for the last 2 years. It's not dangerous. It's too dangerous. In fact, we have been subject to calls of condemnation. The Islamic Brotherhood in Jordan, which is now illegal and has been closed down by the government, was actually calling for the closure of Ecopeace Middle East offices in Jordan. We're the only joint organization. There's no other organization in Jordan that has a office also in Israel in any field, and therefore we really stand out. The Jordanian public know very well that Ecopeace is behind the water energy deal called Project Prosperity, where Jordan would get more water that it desperately needs and be able to sell renewable energy for income that it also desperately needs. But extremists on both sides don't want to see these types of cooperative action. So there had been major demonstrations during the war in Amman calling to end the peace treaty, but also to close the 4 calls. And one of the 4 is to close the offices of Ecopeace. So we had to actually hire security guards to make sure that our staff are safe. Also in Ramallah, with various periods where our Palestinian director, Nada, has been personally condemned. We haven't seen the same level of certainly public demonstrations in Ramallah like we saw in Amman. And that's maybe because Israelis and Palestinians are a little bit more used to meeting each other, and we're certainly not the only joint organization that's Israeli-Palestinian. We're the only one that involves Jordan as a single organization. We've certainly taken measures, and also in Israel, we've had to restrict where we do our neighbors' path trails for long periods. We haven't been able to go to the south or to the north, and presently, we can't go to Qasr al-Yehud, the baptism site in the West Bank, because it's just not safe. The roads are not safe. So we take lots of measures, and our regional gatherings are taking place in Cyprus. It's costing us a lot more because we're having to fly everyone to Cyprus. But we think that there's no alternative. There's no better reality than bringing people together. Zoom is great. We do lots of things together on Zoom, but it's not good enough. Certainly for peace building, you need that. You need to touch. You need to see the skin of the other side, and to really spend quality time. So there's no replacement to physical meeting.
Well, thank you for your continued work over 30 years, over surely many trying times. Do we have any more questions? I don't see any. If not, did
okay.
you go ahead?
I can see some questions in the chat. Oh,
You
okay.
no,
So
you answered those
oh,
questions.
I
Yeah,
answered
those
them.
you answered them. Um, she said, well, thank you, Deborah. Rabbi, would you like to make some closing remarks?
Well, I want to reflect that, Gidon, you look a little grayer and a lot more tired than when you last spoke in 2019. And I want to honor that, like, it's been a really hard time to be doing the work that you're doing. And I appreciate the honesty that you brought to us this evening about the challenges and the hope. And I also want to say, like, you don't owe anybody optimism, but it is a huge gift that you
Yes.
continue to articulate this hope, that you continue despite the fact it's not surprising, but it was still shocking when you mentioned members of your team who had lost, you said, I think, 100 members
100.
of their extended family. I assume that was in Gaza. Um, the reality of the conditions in which you and your staff are working and the fact that you continue to show up to the work is tremendous. And I find personally that I feel that it indicts me, that I am not showing, if you can show up in those conditions, that means I am not showing up enough. And I hope it indicts us all. And so I want to echo your call that if you can do it there in the conditions that you're doing it in, we should all be getting our butts in gear more to do the work right here where we are. So I thank you so much for that charge, for speaking to us at 5 in the morning, your time. I'm sure you have a long, long day ahead of you. Uh, and I hope that we have used your time well. And I know that we will show whether we have used your time well by what we are inspired to do based on this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, and thank you all for listening in, and we're available. Sign up to our newsletter. Go to our website at Ecopeace ME. We produce just a quarterly newsletter where you can be updated as to what we're doing. If you come to the region, please visit us. If you see opportunities to promote cooperation, turn the conversation from the blame game, which is so prevalent in our region and around the world, to an opportunity to cooperate. And I think our work presents that opportunity, and through that opportunity, we really do build trust, and that is our experience, and that's why political agreements get signed, because we're dealing with real life issues of water, of energy, of economy. So please be engaged with us. We're looking forward to meeting members of the congregation, and I look forward to coming out again to Eugene, that beautiful part of the United States, and hopefully we'll meet you again in person soon.
Great, thank you, and thank you everyone for being here.
Toda raba.
Good luck. Toda.
Have a good evening there.
You too. Have a good day.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Yom
Shalom.
Shishi.
Shalom.